In this video, I'm going to show you how you can create this Zelda clone in vanilla JavaScript. So let's get started. By the end of this, we should have a UI that looks like this and also a player map that looks like this. We should also be able to navigate around the player map using our arrow keys and WASD. So with any good project, we want to start off with a decent folder structure. So we're going to have a folder called assets. Inside there, we're going to have a JavaScript folder. Then we're also going to have a CSS folder and an images folder. Inside the images folder, I'm going to import some images over that I have previously. So we have a player folder that's got back, front and left and right, and these are the different states of link that we can be in. We also have 1, 2, 3, these are the different assets for the map, and we have bomb, key and ruby for the equipment at the top here, and heart, empty, half and full for the life over here. So I may change these to have a white background or a slightly off-white background, just because when we have them fully black they do not appear at the top here. So inside of our CSS folder we want to create a new file called styles.scss because we'll be running SCSS for this. We're going to create a new folder called SCSS, and inside here we're going to have a few files, UI.scss, map.scss, and also another file called player.scss. We can import those into our styles.scss, so we do @import, and that's going to be assets, CSS, SCSS. And we'll do that for all three of them. So UI, map and player. We can click save. To see that that's working, we can run this sass command here, which is sass and then the location of our styles .scss file, and then we have a colon and then the location of the output file that we want. So we're going to have styles.min.css. Then we're going to have two flags here. The style flag is going to be compressed, and we're going to have a watch flag as well, so it watches for changes. Okay, so I'm going to replace this assets.scss part here just with a dot, and that should now run. Because we're running it locally, if we're running on a server, that would have worked absolutely fine. Because we're running locally, it's going to be in reference to the current file that we're in. So we can see we've created a styles.min.css file here and also a map file for that. Inside of the JavaScript file now, let's create a main.js file, and this is where all our JavaScript's going to live. And then outside of the assets folder, we want to create a new file called index.html. And this is where our code's going to live. So I'm going to quickly paste in the code that we have and talk you through what's happening. So we've got the standard HTML boilerplate with a head and a body, and a closing tags for each. Inside of the head, we have a title, Legend of Zelda, to match the title here. And we have a link to a style sheet, the one that we created inside the assets folder here. So styles.min.css with a rel of style sheet. And then inside the body, we're going to have a div for the UI and a div for a play window. So this is the UI at the top here, and the play window is this screen at the bottom here. Inside the UI, we're going to display a map, which is this section on the left hand side here. I'm also going to create a section for the equipment, which is going to display the rubies, the keys and the bombs. So each three of these are the same. They're just updating the ID values. So we're going to have rubies, ruby icon and ruby quantity, keys, key icon, key quantity, bombs, bomb icon and bomb quantity. And then below that we're going to have a div for the lives on the right hand side here. That's going to have this title in here, life-life. We're actually using a Google font, which we can import into the styles.scss file here, and that is, if you want to use the same one, press start 2p. And then we have this empty div for available lives. So we're going to be using JavaScript to increment these numbers here, and also JavaScript to pump in the actual current available lives. And then below that we have a play window, and inside the play window we have our player div as well with a class of front. This references the player front PNG, And we're going to update this class depending on which rotation we want the player to be in. Right, so let's hit save and run that file. As you can see, there's not a lot going on here, but we've got some base styles we can add to our styles.css file, and that is to set the font family for the entire body in HTML. We're also going to set a margin and a padding of 0, a background color of black, and a font color of white. So if we refresh that, that should start to look a little bit better. So let's move on to the UI.scss. So inside of here, we're referencing the UI ID, and we're giving that a width of 100% minus 200 pixels. This will give us a padding left and right, as we can see here, of 100 pixels either way. It's going to have a height of 130 pixels. These may change later on to be better for larger screens. We're also going to give it a margin left of auto and a margin right of auto. That will set it nicely in the middle here. I'm going to have a margin top of 50 pixels and a padding bottom of 20 pixels, so it doesn't touch the player window. And we want to display flex, so each of these items can sit nicely next to each other. Now, as mentioned before, here in the map we have a 400 pixel width, equipment we have 400 pixels, and also life we have 400 pixels. These will be updated potentially to 33% with a minimum width and maybe stackable. I'm not sure how far down of window size we're going to go. So for the map we have a width of 400 pixels, a background color of grey, and a height of 100% of the UI div. The equipment is the same. We have a width of 400, a height of 100% of the UI div, and a padding left of 50 pixels. That doesn't actually touch the map box. Inside of the equipment div here, that's going to be 400 pixels. So inside of that we now have our rubies, we have our keys, and we have our bombs. Now all three of these are pretty much exactly the same. The only thing that we're updating is the background image. So we're going to give the initial block, so this div on the outside here, rubies, keys, and bombs, will have a display flex, and inside of that for the icon, which we see this icons here, they will have a height and a width of 25 pixels, a margin of 10 pixels top and bottom, and a margin of 2 pixels left and right. The background size will be contain with a background image of the box that we're currently under. The background will be set to no repeat. Because it's contain, it will try to repeat it if the width isn't the same as the box we're in. And we have a background position of center. Values here, we're going to give a padding top of 15 pixels and a padding left of 5 pixels. We'll give the top 15 pixels because it sits up here, and also 5 pixels to keep it away from the actual icon. So we do the same for the keys, but we just update the background image to key.png, and the same for bombs, but we update it to bomb.png. So now we move on to the lives. That has a width again of 400 pixels, but we're updating the color now to be red to give this a nice red color for the title, and a height of 100%. The available lives is going to be displayed flex, so the hearts can sit next to each other, and each heart is going to have a 25 pixel by 25 pixel, same as ones over here, height and width, and a margin of 10 pixels top and bottom, and 2 pixels left and right, so they're spaced out nicely. The background size for these will be cover, and if the heart class also has a heart full class, we're going to give it the heart full PNG, and same for the half and the empty. So if we save that now and refresh, we can see that we have a nice UI here. Now the lives aren't showing at the moment because we haven't set up the JavaScript to show the lives, and we've also got these, we can increment these to show that these are working as well. So the next thing we're going to look at is showing the lives. So let's open up the JavaScript file, main.js, and we want to create a few variables in here. We're going to have a lives variable, rubies, bombs, and keys variable. So the lives is going to be full, full, and full. This references the names of each of these. The rubies is going to be set to 0 to start off with, and bombs and keys also set to 0 because the player shouldn't start off with any monetary values or bombs or keys. So to show the lives, we're going to create a function called display lives. I'm going to grab the available lives element we created on the HTML page here, so this available lives ID here. And what we want to do is we want to set the inner part of that HTML to an empty string. Now this is because we're going to call this display lives multiple times to update the lives. So when we update this array here, if we add a fourth one in, for example, or set one to half or empty, we're going to be calling this display lives to refresh the lives part on the screen here. So once we've set that to empty, we can start looping through this array here, and we can start creating a div. So we have a variable called div, and that's equal to document.createElement div. We want to give that div a class name of heart, and then heart with the name of the heart that we have. And then we want to append that div to the lives container. So if we call this function and refresh the front end, we can now see that we have our hearts in here. If I change this to half and click save and refresh, we now have half a life showing here. I'll change that back to full. So we're going to be testing this quite a bit, so I'm going to be creating an init function. And this is where we're going to initialize each part of code. And then we're going to call init at the bottom. Here. That will keep our code nice and tidy, and we can refresh the front end and we can see it's working. So now let's work on incrementing the rubies, keys and the bombs. Each one will have their own function. So here we can have our increment rubies. So what we're saying here is if the rubies value here is less than 999, because we don't want to go over 999, that's a max. We want to get the rubies container, and then we want to increment this number. So this will change later on to have a value parameter in here, because we'll have different types of rubies we can pick up, and then we'll increment it by that parameter in here. But for now, we're just going to increment it by 1. And then what we're going to do, we're going to get the rubies containers, and we're going to set the inner text is going to be equal to the rubies value here. And we're going to convert that to a string, and then we're going to have a pad start here, which is going to set any values that aren't defined here. So let's say, for example, this was 1, it would then put 0, 2 zeros in front of that 1. If this was 10, it would put 1 0 in front of that. So to show this working, we can create a set interval, and inside here we can call back function, and we can run this increment rubies, and we run that every 10 times a second. And then if we save that and refresh, we should be able to see this number's incrementing now. So I'm just going to delete that, refresh the front end again. So now let's create the same function for keys and bombs. So these will be exactly the same. We have a limiter on the maximum amount that they can have in there, and we also have the getting the documents by ID. This is just updated to the IDs that we see in these boxes. So ruby quantity, bomb quantity, and key quantity. And then we're just going to increment these numbers up, and then set the values using the pad start again. Now to test that these work, we can create these 3 separate set intervals, each having their own time, so we can see each one updating by themselves. So if we've refreshed the front end, we can see that they're updating independently. So let's just remove that for now and refresh the front end. So now we have the main UI section built, we could start working on the actual map. So I've created a variable here, and this is what's referencing the map on the front end. So we have ones, which is referencing this 1.png, 2's referencing the 2.png, and 3's referencing the 3.png. We also have this E here, and this is going to be an entrance to a cave. This will change later on because we'll need to update these values here, for example. But this is the important one here, the S, which is the spawn point of our character. So to actually get this showing on the front end, we're going to create a function called createMap. Inside here, we're going to get the play window, the same as we did our character above, by the ID. And then we're going to start looping through this array that we have here. So the first one is going to loop through each row, and then the second loop inside will loop through each column inside of it. So to do this, we have a for loop, and that's set to map1.length, and we're going to create a new variable called row, and that's going to be creating a new div element. I'm going to give that div element a class name of row and the row index, and then we want to append that row to this play window variable that we have here. Then straight after that, we're going to create a new for loop, and that's going to be map with the index.length, and that will get each one in here. And then we're going to call that cell. We're going to create a new element div, and we want to give that a class name of a cell, and a cell with the actual number that we have here. And then we want to append that cell to each row. So if I save that and we refresh the front end, we won't see anything at the moment because we haven't got any CSS, but we can see inside of the code here. So we can't actually see anything yet because we haven't added create map to the init function here. So if we add that into here, click save and then refresh, we should now inside of our play window, here we go. So we have each row, and then inside each row we have each cell. And these cell-1 is what's going to reference these 1, 2, 3 elements over here. So now that we've got those in there, let's now put the styling in for that. So inside the map.scss file, we're going to reference the player window div, and that's going to have a background of this slightly off orange. That will have a width of 100 view width minus 200 pixels. This is for the padding that we put in. I'm also going to give it a height, which is going to have the calculation of 100 view height minus 200 pixels. We're then going to divide that value by 4, and then we're going to multiply that value by 3, and that should give us a 4:3 aspect ratio. These may need to update because I'm not sure they work on slightly larger screens, but I'll have a solution to that. The position is going to be relative, the margin left auto, margin right auto, so it centers in the middle, and a overflow of hidden. The reason for the overflow of hidden is as we move Link out of the window here, we don't want him actually showing outside of this box here, so we're going to set the overflow to hidden. So each row is going to have a full width of 100% of the play window div. The height is going to be a calc of 100% divided by 10 because we have 10 blocks high, and we're going to display that as flex, so they sit nicely after each other. And then the cell will have a width of 100% divided by 16 because we have 16 blocks across, so it's going to be 10 by 16. A height of 100% of the row, and the background size is going to be cover. Background repeat will be no repeat, and background position will be center. Now if you have a background size of contain, it will cause issues. And then under here we're going to say if the cell also has a class with cell-1, we're going to give it a background image of 1.png, cell 2 has 2.png, cell 3 3.png, and then cell E, I'm just going to switch back to here, cell E has a background color of black, and that is to reference this cave entrance here. So if we hit save and then refresh the front end, we can see we now have this nice map inside of here. So now that we have the map, let's start styling the actual player. So let's start styling Link into here. So Link will have a width of 100% of this box divided by 16. So he's going to be exactly 1 block wide, and then the height will be 100% divided by 10, so it'll be 1 block high. The position will be absolute, background size contain as before, background repeat, no repeat. We've also got a transition here because when we're going to move him, we don't want it jutting 1 pixel at a time. We want it to move nice and smoothly, so we're going to have a transition there. And then here, if the player also has a class of front, back, left or right, we're going to switch out the background image for each one of this inside this player folder here. So front, back, left and right. So if we hit save and refresh the front end, we can see Link is sitting at the top here. So now obviously we want to set Link to be as close to that spawn point as possible. So to do that, inside the main.js file, underneath the create map function, we create a new function called position link. And here we're going to be getting the spawn point, which will be the cell-s. So that will be getting this cell-s here, and it's going to get the bounding boxes of that cell. We're also going to be getting the player element by ID. And then we're going to be setting the style top of that player to be equal to math.floor, so it rounds the number down to a whole number, otherwise we get a long number with I think about 8 digits on the end. And we're going to convert this to a number just in case any of this comes through as a string. There shouldn't be any reason why, but it's just to be safe. I'm going to set that to spawn.x minus 200 pixels plus spawn.height. So that should give us the spawn x position minus 200 pixels, and then we're going to add on the actual height of that box. And then we're going to do the same for player.styleLeft. We're going to have the math.floor, and then we're going to convert it to a number, but this time we're going to get the spawn.y position, and then we're going to add on the spawn.width. So as before, let's call this position link function inside of the init function. Click save and then refresh. We can see we have link nicely positioned here, but at the moment we can't move him. So now let's create the code to actually be able to move him. So to do this, we're going to get the player div, so we're going to get the element by ID with the player, and then we're going to get the current position that that player is in. So to do that, we do player div.getBounding client rec. And that will give us the same values that we have up here for the spawn position. And then we're going to create this document add event listener. So this is going to listen for key downs, and it's going to return an event. The two bits of information we're looking from this event are the keys and the codes. So this if statement said if the event.key is equal to arrow up, or the event.key is equal to key W, so we can use the arrow keys or we can use the WASD keys. Then what we want to do is set the player div.styleTop, and then we want that to equal the player div.offsetTop minus 10, and then add a px on the end of it. This should move the player up the screen, and then we're going to set that player div.className to back. So this class name here, we're going to set that to back. And then next we're going to watch for the arrow down and key S, and we're going to set exactly the same, but the offset top is now going to be plus 10 pixels, so he moves down the screen 10 pixels. I'm going to set the class name to front. Now it's the same for left and right, but rather than setting the top positions, we're going to set this left positions. I'm going to grab the offset left for these. So to move left, we're going to have offset left minus 10, and to move right, we're going to have offset left plus 10 pixels. And then we'll set the player div class name relative to the location we're moving in. So if we hit save and give this a refresh now, we can now navigate around the screen. So in the next video, we'll be looking at when we move out of the bounds here, we switch to a different map. We're also going to be looking at setting these so we can't actually walk inside of walls, and also so we can go inside of caves. So if you found this video useful, hit the subscribe button, and also check out this video on screen now to see other games that I've created using JavaScript. Thank you for watching.